Thank you so much. And that was the music of young Joshua Regrello on the steel pan as we serenaded to thank our sponsors for Governance Week 2026. We have three silver sponsors this year. They are Unilever from Trinidad and Tobago, the Pan Jamaica Group from Jamaica, and Massey Holdings here from Trinidad and Tobago. We also have several bronze sponsors. These include Republic Bank Limited, First Citizens Bank Limited, and PwC from Trinidad and Tobago. And we welcome again GA Rowe and Sons Limited from Belize. We are also thankful to Angostura Limited and Infolink Services Limited for a special associate sponsor contribution. And now we come to the third panel for today, Governance Week, Day 4, as we look at family-owned businesses and SMEs. I have to tell you guys, we've had two brilliant panels so far. It's just been riveting conversation here at CCGI. So, of course, we are quite looking forward to this, our final panel for today, that's going to look at succession without conflict, structures for continuity and stability. Our panelists are Andrew Rowe, Ria Mankee-Sookram, and Yualande Christopher. And they, will, of course, will be introduced by our moderator, who we will bring on and who I will now introduce as we get ready for our third and final panel here at Governance Week 2026, Day 4. So we have Adele Baig. Thank you, Adele. I've been saying it all the while, and then suddenly I forgot the pronunciation. So, Adele Baig-Rameshwar, who is a seasoned and dynamic leader with over 2 decades of experience in the banking and financial services industry. Just to share with everyone, I'm giving a summary of Adele's really wonderful profile. It's already there for you in the agenda, which we shared earlier. And of course, since we do have some new persons who may have joined us, especially for this panel, we will put the agenda in again so you get their full profiles, okay? So currently, Adele is serving as the Assistant General Manager at Infolink Services Limited, where she plays a pivotal role in ensuring the availability, reliability, and sustainability of IT service solutions and systems. Her career spans multiple regions, including Canada, the Caribbean, and Latin America, where she has led cross-functional teams and collaborated with diverse stakeholders to deliver impactful results. She's known for her strategic thinking and results-oriented mindset and an ability to translate complex data into actionable insights. I will agree with this because we have had Adele do our modules with us at Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute, and you see her brilliance shine through when we are discussing those modules. So Adele holds an MBA from Henley Management College, a degree in computer science from Costa, a certificate in project management as well. Her professional journey includes progressively senior roles at Republic Bank Limited, Scotiabank Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana, and RBC Financial Caribbean Limited. Adele, I am so pleased to welcome you for the first time to Governance Week here at the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute. And I place this panel in your hands, which I know is going to be a brilliant success for today as well. So I hand over the floor to you so you can introduce your panelists and we get started for the final panel.
Thank you very much, Kamala. I want to welcome everybody to Caribbean Corporate Governance Week and to our panel discussion on succession without conflict, structures for continuity and stability. Our discussion sits within a broader conference theme of governance in a volatile world. We are operating in a time marked by economic uncertainty, technological disruption, shifting regulatory expectations, geopolitical instability, climate-related risks, and changing workforce dynamics. In such an environment, succession planning, no doubt, is no longer simply about human resources. Nor is it something reserved for family businesses alone. It is a critical governance issue. Historically, organizations often invest heavily in growth strategies, operational excellence, and risk management, but they fail to prepare adequately for leadership transitioning. So, when succession is left to chance, organizations can face uncertainty, conflict, loss of stakeholder confidence, erosion of enterprise value, and in some cases, organizational failure. So, effective succession planning, on the other hand, creates continuity, preserves institutional knowledge, strengthens stakeholder confidence, and ensures that both leadership and ownership transitions can occur in a structured, transparent, and stable manner. So today, we are fortunate to be joined by three distinguished experts who bring complementary perspectives from business leadership, family business governance, wealth succession, law, dispute resolution, corporate governance, and estate planning. So I'm going to introduce our panelists and I'm going to do a sort of condensed version of your profile. And I'm going to try and see if I could share your profile as well so that others can see the wonderful profiles we do have for
Yeah,
our.
it's already said in the
It's
chat.
already shared?
Yeah,
Okay, wonderful, good.
yeah,
Thank
you
you.
know what?
Lovely. So, our first panelist is Andrew Rowe. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Rowe Group of Companies in Belize, one of Belize's largest and longest established family enterprises. Andrew assumed leadership of the group on 1st January 2026, following a remarkable progression throughout the organization. Rather than entering leadership through inheritance alone, he joined the business as a management trainee in 2011 and rose through executive ranks, eventually serving as managing director of RF&G Insurance, where he led significant growth, profitability, and regional expansion. Today, Andrew oversees a diversified group spanning financial services, tourism, agriculture, distribution, and real estate. That's a lot. As a member of the founding family, he has first-hand experience navigating the intersection of family ownership, corporate governance, leadership development, and succession planning. Andrew brings a practical perspective on preparing the next generation of leaders while protecting organizational stability and long-term value. So please welcome me and join me in welcoming Andrew Rowe.
Good afternoon, everybody.
So Andrew,
Nice.
welcome, and please go ahead and present us.
All right.
Adele, no, let's have all three panelists introduce first, and then
Okay,
Andrew
sure.
will present.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So our second panelist is Ria Mankee-Sookram. She's an attorney at law, family business, and family wealth advisor from Trinidad and Tobago. Ria is recognized for her work advising family-owned businesses on governance, succession planning, conflict management, wealth preservation, trust, and estates and dispute resolution. She's the author of The 7 Domains of the Family Business, The Journey to a Multi-Generational Legacy, and has built a reputation for helping family enterprises develop governance structures that support business stability while maintaining family harmony. Her expertise sits at the crossroads of law, governance, family dynamics, wealth stewardship, and conflict prevention, making her uniquely positioned to discuss how organizations can design succession processes that minimize disputes before they arise. So we welcome Ria.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And our third panelist is Yualande. Chris, is it Yualande or Yuland?
It's Yualande.
Yualande.
Yep.
Okay. Yualande Christopher. She's an attorney at law from Jamaica. Yualande brings more than 20 years of experience in civil and commercial law, advising clients on complex corporate, commercial, governance, and probate matters. As founder of Yualande Christopher and Associates, CEO of Chemland Financing Limited, and corporate secretary to Jamaican operations of several multinational companies. She brings a unique blend of legal, governance, and business leadership expertise. Her work spans contentious estates, corporate structures, governance frameworks, arbitration, and accountability mechanisms, giving her a deep insight into the risks organizations face when succession planning is poorly managed and disputes emerge. She also serves on the private sector organization of Jamaica's Corporate Governance Committee and chairs its Artificial Intelligence Subcommittee. So please join me in welcoming Yualande Christopher. Right.
Thank you, Adele.
So I'd like to invite Andrew to be first in presenting.
Great. Thank you very much. And yes, thanks everybody for joining today. Excuse me, I'm looking forward to you guys are hearing me okay, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so as you might have heard from the intro, I am a member of the Rogue family here in Belize. I'm employed by the business as well as I'm a shareholder essentially. And so when I speak about succession, it comes from two different places. The first place is from the job that I was doing at RF&G, which is an insurance company that's part of the group. That's where I entered the group as a management trainee and ultimately took over the top job after about 11 years. That was its own succession journey. And I had a fantastic managing director by the name of Guy Howison, who really took me under his wing and focused very hard on making sure I was successful, or let me rephrase, that we were successful in the succession journey. So that's one side from my day-to-day work. And then the other side has been family ownership succession and the transition of ownership, both, the actual shares that you transfer, but more importantly, the responsibilities, the obligations, and the privileges that are transferred with ownership. And those have been two very different journeys. They've brought their own experiences. And so as I go through the few things that I have to say here, I just wanted to frame that contextually so that you guys understand kind of the background of where I come up with this from. So today we're talking about succession without conflict. I don't know if succession can be without conflict. I think conflict is going to happen. And so that needs to be planned for and managed when it arises. But when organizations start talking about succession, very often they're looking at finding the right successor. And really that's a piece of the challenge. The right person, the right successor is important. But the question that we're trying to answer is, how do we ensure continuity through these leadership changes? Because succession isn't just replacing somebody, taking someone out and putting it in. I mean, maybe I should rephrase that. It can be done that way, certainly not the ideal way of doing it, but you can just remove one person and put someone else in. But really, it should be a transfer of knowledge, a transfer of authority, relationships, responsibilities, and trust. Trust is key, and trust takes a long time to develop. And you're developing trust at all levels. It could be with the directors, with the board, it could be with management, employees, clients, suppliers, the list goes on and on. And where succession fails, conflict emerges because people are forced into negotiating their expectations in real time. It's where it's not planned out. And that's why we're talking today about the structure of content of succession and making sure that creates continuity. But where succession succeeds, the expectations are usually met before the transition can begin. And so, succession without conflict is fundamentally, I guess, about three things. It's commitment to the process and to the structure, which is number two, that you put in. And lastly, quite a bit of patience. So starting out with the commitment side, really what that means is that everybody must want to see this the transition succeed. When I say everybody, it means everybody involved. It starts with the person who is doing the succeeding as well as the person who's stepping aside. Those really are the two core ones. But the rest need to be supportive as well. Everybody else, the shareholders, owners, board, management, staff, everyone needs to be in it. And so really, I think there's some overlooked areas of succession, and they involve two things. The successor is stepping into a new role, and that comes with all of its challenges. But the incumbent is stepping out of a role that they most likely are quite comfortable in. And so you've got the successor moving in from, a level or they're going into quite an uncomfortable situation. They're learning a lot, they're being challenged. There's probably a lot of pressure. But the incumbent is kind of the opposite. They're moving from stability, usually, to instability. As you step out, what does the future hold for me? And to make it successful, both have to have some intentional effort. Very often organizations focus heavily on preparing the successor, but they don't give sufficient attention to preparing the incumbent for that transition. And that is key. Having the incumbent support is key to making sure a succession event is successful. So when that outgoing leader is seeing succession as part of their legacy, as in, I've spent so many years, 15 years, 20 years, however long it may be, building something. That is the legacy of the incumbent. And when a successor comes in and is seen as somebody who wants to preserve that legacy and hopefully build upon it, they usually can work well together. And so, to me, one of the governance lessons that can be taken away from this is that a succession plan shouldn't just define the person coming in, but it must define the future role of that incumbent who is moving out. And I've not only lived through a few succession events, but I've also participated in and overseen the succession of other employees within the company. And what I've found has been successful is getting people, or getting those incumbents, getting the day-to-day management work or the day-to-day challenges out of their hands and letting them do the things that they like to do and they enjoy doing. And you extend that runway much further. They might want to stay on a little bit longer and provide you some support if you can take away the headaches. But how do you do that? It comes down to structure. And all good intentions need some kind of framework. So when succession just has to be supported. The goodwill and good intentions by themselves will never create a structure. It really works best when there's clearly defined framework that everyone understands and accepts. You got to have both. And really, to me, there's three core areas. There's responsibility, there's authority, and there must be remuneration and recognition. And so you have to think about what responsibilities are going to transfer when do they transfer? And the next one is the authority. So, okay, you've taken on some of these core responsibilities. Now you need the authority to make sure that they can happen. Without that authority, you just create frustration. That's where bottlenecks start to show up. That's where conflict begins. And boards, I think, have a very important role to play here in making sure that authority is appropriately transitioned deliberately rather than just hoping that it will happen along the way. Clarity is key for everybody. And then lastly, remuneration and recognition. Responsibility and authority start to increase. Obviously, remuneration should follow suit. I think you'd struggle to find any willing, keen successor to take on any role if they're not going to be remunerated appropriately for the additional work, responsibility, and authority that they've been given. And sometimes organizations overlook this. They think that the succession alone, the job position alone is exciting enough, and that person should be thankful for the opportunity. It doesn't work like that. You need to make sure that you're putting the right amount of money in their pocket, that they're not looking elsewhere, and that they feel like the work they're putting in is worthwhile. But that's only one side of it. Milestones are important. Establishing milestones and then celebrating when they're met. Again, we very often overlook the successes. We kind of just count them, put them in the back seat, and we carry on. And so taking a little bit of time to pause and celebrate some of the successes is also key. The other thing that I found is quite useful is a bit of mentorship. The being mentored through a succession event can really add a lot of value to. I will speak on behalf of the successor because I've not yet been an incumbent who's passed something on, but having somebody who you can confide in and you can share your challenges with and who can help guide you and advise you on how to manage them is a real huge help. The really lucky people get a incumbent who can do both. He or she can hand over those responsibilities, but they can also mentor you and coach you and sympathize with you along the way. But that's not always the case. So seeking out a third party mentor is also advisable. The last thing I'll say is patience. Patience is needed in succession. The successor needs to be patient with the process. They need to be patient with the incumbent who's stepping aside and appreciate that it can be an emotionally challenging time for that person, coming to the end of their career and a big change in life. And likewise, the incumbent has to be patient with their successor. They're not going to get it right every time. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to get it wrong. But a good incumbent handing over to a successor will create a space where those mistakes can be made within safe limits, allow them to be made, and then use them as learning lessons to then transfer on. So patience. That was a hard one for me to learn. Those are my quick off the top thoughts on succession and how it can be structured to limit conflict because it's going to happen.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for those very valuable insights and practical experiences. I think I really like your frameworks that you had. They really, really speak to me. Ria, would you like to go next, please? Thanks.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Adele. Excellent presentation, Andrew. I really enjoyed it. It's going to be tough coming after you. Well, let me say good afternoon again to everyone. I am, of course, happy to be part of Governance Week, and thank you again to the CCGI. So our focus today is on family businesses and SMEs. Now, our title for today is Succession with Conflict. And I would ask the same question that Andrew asked. Can we really have a conflict-free succession in a family business when we have a father that has to be a parent, an owner, a leader? Or we have a brother that works in the business, but a sister who doesn't, and yet they receive an income from it, or maybe even a spouse who married into it and have some sort of direct influence over decisions. So in the family business system, where we have those three independent but overlapping groups, the family, the business, the owners, inherently there is conflict. Yet you are being asked to share one asset and one future. But thankfully, our title goes on today, Structures for Continuity and Stability. And that is really the goal of the family business system, where conflict is normal. Building a conflict-resilient structure, one that is built to absorb disagreement as a routine and governed event. Because what kills family businesses isn't so much the disagreement, it's what happens when there's no legitimate place for that disagreement to be ventilated. It can get swallowed at the dinner table, smile through the Christmas photos, and it doesn't disappear. It compounds quietly for years until one random Thursday afternoon, someone says or does something innocently, and 20 years of unspoken resentment gets detonated all at once. So if conflict is structurally inevitable, the real work of succession planning isn't really removing it. It's about building the structure that catches it before it becomes a casualty. Now, Andrew would have spoken about the transferring of ownership and leadership, and I'd like to add to that picture. So what you have on your screen, and I've also shared it in the chat so that you can have it, it's a legacy framework for building a conflict-resilient succession so that when conflict comes, and it will, there will be somewhere for it to go. So we will go through it and use it as a tool, as a diagnostic for your own family business succession as well. And each letter of the word legacy represents a particular element or domain for you to really consider which of these is your family missing, or maybe has some work to do, or maybe where you feel your family is on track with. Okay, thank you, Adele. So we can remove the picture, and because I've placed it in the chat. Thank you. So L is leadership transition and development. And here's the question that every family avoids. Who is actually being developed to lead, and since when? So most families don't have a leadership succession plan, much less a leadership development plan. What they have is a leadership assumption. Either the eldest will take over, the one working the hardest will take over, the apple of daddy's eye will take over, or nobody has decided anything and everyone is quietly assuming it will be them. Leadership transition is not an event. It's not the day that the founder retires or he passes. It's a process. Years of deliberate development and mentorship, so that by the time the baton actually needs to pass, the person receiving it has already been carrying some weight. And it's not just given a title. And the person passing on the title, the incumbent, is ready to do so confidently. So ask yourself, if your founder had to step back tomorrow, not 10 years from now, but tomorrow, is there a name? And not a vague sense of it will probably be him, but an actual name known to the family with a plan behind it. And if the honest answer is no, that's not a leadership gap. That is a leadership silence. And silence is exactly where conflict goes to grow and to flourish. E stands for equity. And I want to be clear about this word because families may confuse it sometimes with being equal. Equity is not always being equal. Equity is a form of fairness, and fairness looks very different for every family and even for every child in the same family, because every child is at a different age and stage of their lives and their careers. So consider a founder with a daughter who has worked in the business for 15 years, building it alongside him, and a son who has built his own career and is frankly quite contented with that. If the founder decides to divide the business equally between them, 50-50, is it fair? His daughter contributed significantly more than his son. It's equal, but is there equity? The daughter may not see it that way. It's really avoidance dressed up as fairness, because dividing things equally lets the founder skip that harder, more honest conversation about who actually contributed what their expectations are, and what he decides ultimately the actual reality will be. So equity means having those harder conversations. Even at the end of it, the founder still decides to split the business 50-50. The structure for continuity and stability is the conversation, not just the document, though the documents matter. The wills, trusts, shareholders' agreements, buy-sell provisions, those are the mechanisms. But the mechanisms will only work if the conversation behind it actually happened. Otherwise, it's quite likely that the same daughter may feel a sense of resentment towards her father even after he's gone, or to her brother and the business. So ask yourself, does everyone in your family actually understand why they'll receive what they'll receive? Or have they simply just assumed it will be split evenly because evenly is the easiest thing and the easiest thing to never discuss? G is for governance and decision making. And this is where we come back to those three overlapping groups from the start: family, the business, and ownership, sharing one table. Now, most family businesses have no separation between those tables at all. Every decision, family or business, gets made in the same way, informally, around whoever is available, and usually by the person who has been making decisions the longest. That may have worked when the founder was the decision maker, the only decision maker. But It gets challenging the moment there's more than one generation with a legitimate stake in the outcome. So good governance also includes deciding in advance which decisions belong to which table. So a family council for family matters. Who's employed? Who's not? What is expected of you when you are employed? How disputes between family members get handled. You have a board for business matters, strategy, investment, operational direction, and you have the clarity on which decisions need both. Because without that separation, every business disagreement gets felt as a family betrayal because there's no other category to put it in. But with it, a disagreement at the boardroom table is simply a disagreement at the boardroom table. And it does not affect our conversation over Sunday lunch around the kitchen table. So ask yourself, when there's a real disagreement in your business, is there an actual forum where it goes? Or does it just go to whoever is in the room? A is for alignment in action. You can have leadership development, equity, governance, all on paper and still fail if the people living inside those documents aren't actually aligned on what the family business is for. So alignment means everyone, the working sibling, the non-working sibling, the spouse who married and the founder, the next gen, actually agreeing on the vision, not just signing a document that states one. So a constitution that nobody believes in is just paper. But a constitution that everyone actually aligns behind acts as a shield for both the family and the business. And this is the domain that has to be revisited, not just written and filed away. Have your family meetings, regular scheduled check-ins where the vision gets restated and recommitted to. And it's not because anyone doubts it, but because alignment is not a single decision. You have to make it a habit. Things drift, people change. The 18-year-old cousin who said she never wanted to be part of the business is 10 years later, perhaps the most capable person in the room. And if nobody has been checking in, then nobody noticed that shift happening. So ask yourself, when was the last time your family actually sat down and asked, are we still aligned on this business and why are we doing this? What is the emotional glue holding us together on one shared future? And if you can't remember, then that is your answer. C is for conflict management and communication. And here we return to where we began. Conflict is normal. It's structurally guaranteed by the very shape of the family business system. The domain that matters isn't whether conflict shows up. It's whether your family has a way to manage it when it does. So a simple way is to implement at least 3 things. So the first would be to meet disagreement without hostility or contempt, as challenging as that may be. The second is to pay attention to both what is said and what is left unsaid. And the third is to separate the role from the relationship. So the person disagreeing with you across the boardroom table in that moment is a co-owner or a board member, not simply your child or your younger brother or sister being disrespectful just because they have a different opinion. The families who manage conflict well aren't the families who never disagree. They are the families who built in advance a place for that disagreement to be heard and a process for resolving it. And that can happen sometimes with the help of a neutral third party, a mediator, or a trusted advisor. So the conversation can happen without the relationship absorbing the full weight of it. So ask yourself, the last disagreement in your family business, was it actually resolved with an outcome everyone accepted? Or did it just fizzle out and go quiet? Quiet is not resolution. And as we know, silence is exactly where conflict goes to grow and flourish. And why? The last letter. And the one that most families forget entirely is you. If you don't take care of yourself, you cannot take care of your family. You cannot take care of your family business. And that's not a platitude, that's a structural fact, because every domain we just walk through depends on the people inside it actually being well enough to do the work. And here's what I want to leave you with, because it's not often said on a stage like this. Holding in those emotions like resentment, anger, bitterness, a sense of unfairness, the things that you wanted to say but you buried for years, that doesn't sit quietly in the family. That actually sits in the body, and it shows up as stress, as illness, as the very debilitation that erodes a person's capacity to lead and even to live. And this, I think, is probably the worst type of conflict, because it's not conflict with anyone else, but within yourself. So the structure here is one that I cannot tell you. The structure here is one for your own personal well-being, and one that you consciously have to choose. Hiking, walking, hitting the gym, picking up a hobby, traveling, being involved in religious or spiritual activities and community, whatever allows you to release that weight. And the point is that you have to choose it deliberately. Because if you don't choose a structure for stability, you will default to one for instability. Going to the bar every evening, the excessive unhealthy food that comforts you in the moment but then costs you later. Scrolling for 5 hours because you're chasing the next dopamine hit. Those are structures as well, but they're not ones that are built for continuity. Every domain we discuss exists to give conflict somewhere legitimate to go, precisely so it doesn't have to be carried silently in your body, in your mind, on your shoulders for 20 years until one random Thursday afternoon. So succession without conflict was never the real goal, because conflict was never optional. What is optional is whether that conflict has somewhere legitimate to go. Leadership, equity, governance, alignment, communication, you. 6 domains. And in my experience, every family business that has fallen apart was missing at least one of them. And every family business that had lasted found a way to hold all 6, even if not perfectly. So ask yourselves honestly, which one is missing for you? Thank you very much, and I look forward to our discussions later.
Thanks very much, Ria. Oh, that was really, really good. Thank you for sharing those really important perspectives on governance, legacy, and family. Wow. So I'd like to invite Yualande now to present.
Thank you. Good evening. Can you hear me well?
Yes, can hear you.
Wonderful. Good evening, Madam Moderator, my distinguished fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. By this point in Governance Week, I can tell your minds are probably full and your notebooks are full of. So I will keep it very tight and be brief and purposeful and clear, pretty much the way that your governance structure should be. I shan't overstay my welcome. And I endorse everything that Andrew and Ria just said. Those were just incredibly great nuggets of wisdom. Before I get into it, though, I'd like to ask the room a few questions. By a show of hands, I want you to say how many of you have identified the person who will take over your business when you pass. Just raise your hands if you've identified the person or persons who will take over your business when you pass. Wow. Okay. Keep your hand up if you've also written a clear roadmap for that person. Am I missing something? I'm not seeing any hands.
You have one hand.
One hand.
That's Vishnu. Yes.
All right. All right, keep your hand up, that one hand, if that person knows about every unfinished financial decision sitting on your desk right now. The ones only you understand. All right. Vishnu is on a roll. And finally, keep it up, Vishnu. If they know who to watch for and, that person who might take advantage of your passing. Excellent. Well, look around at the raised hand. That's the gap. That's the entire talk right there. You can lower your hand now, Vishnu. Thank you very much. I'm a corporate governance advisor, but I'm also a commercial law litigator. And I sit at the forefront of it and also at the back end of it. I basically help to structure governance so that when a leader dies or a critical member retires, or someone becomes mentally incapacitated, there is enough structure to carry on the business. But I also see it when it falls horribly apart. It spirals into litigation. When the sibling who fell passed over comes out, or the executive who was promised the role decides to disrupt. I see it when the directors and the beneficiaries are at war. I see when the executor has to, and is called to pick a side, or when the executor becomes a trustee shareholder, knows nothing at all about the business, and he's accused of moving too slowly. I see it when the executor has to sell assets to get the company liquid and he's tapping into somebody's legacy. Take my advice. By the time a succession dispute reaches litigation, governance has already failed. Because it's usually at that point a war of personalities, what us Jamaicans call fighting over deadlift. So there is a reason why the CCGI puts on workshops like these. It is not just an academic exercise. It's to ensure that good governance meets smooth continuity. And I think by the absence of hands, there is some degree of structural governance failure in the room. So you should know if your absence means decisions become relationships and alliances, then you probably have a governance structure failure issue, or you are unable to distinguish leadership from ownership in your business. I believe it was Andrew who raised that point. When succession becomes whatever the most powerful person in the room wants, or worse, based on what the lawyer advises that person, you have a governance failure. And is that really what you want your business to become? In the Caribbean especially, this shows up more intensely because so much of our corporate landscape, even our largest and most institutional companies, they carry the DNA of the family business. The founder's voice doesn't disappear just because the company levels up or becomes larger. You want an example of this? You can look right at the Butch Stewart line of cases that's playing out right now in our courts. It's been 5 years since he passed, and his estate is still being litigated. So you're probably saying, okay, Yualande, yes, you've pointed out the issues. You see that there are problems. How do you fix it? Well, the first is that you must understand that succession is a board process. You can't just, as the founder or the leader, go into a corner and draft a document. You can do that with your will. But if you're dealing with your company's succession, corporate succession, it has to happen at the board level. You must have minutes and resolutions and regular board meetings, audits. You can't have it when the CEO is about to walk through the door. Secondly, as I said, competence and ownership are two different things. And third, please, I am begging you, build in conflict resolution mechanisms. To have an independent director with real teeth who will make the call when family or insiders can't, or a mediator that can sit with the warring factions before it becomes a messy public issue. Remember that we're living in a quick fix TikTok Gen Alpha world where you can get canceled in 24 hours and borders can close in less time. So your transition, that period between when a founder is no longer around and when the beneficiary gets the legacy, is dangerous. It's not always going to be smooth. And you may not, your company may not be able to absorb an external shock of internal power vacuum and the geopolitical climate that we're living in. So I'll leave you with this. Have a map. Map out the writing, in writing, who should get what and who should lead it. Set ownership and leadership apart. And protect the business with enough governance and mechanisms that work when you are gone. And that's all I'll leave with for the time being. I look forward to quite an engaging discussion where we can get into more of it.
Thank you very much, Yualande, for those thoughtful observations and insights. I must say some of these things I had never even thought about. I don't have a family business, but so thank you to all three of our speakers. I must say what is particularly interesting is that we've heard from we've heard exactly three distinct but complementary perspectives. Andrew from the perspective of family enterprise leader operating through a succession transition, Ria from the perspective of governance and family wealth advisory, and Yualande from the legal and governance perspective, where succession failures often become visible through disputes and litigation, right? So what I'd like to do now is to spend some time exploring some of the themes that have emerged in our discussion so far, right? So the first question I want to ask is, if there is one governance structure that organizations consistently underestimate when preparing for succession, what would that be and why? I'd like to start with Yualande.
Thank you, Adele. I think it would, in my experience, be the transition period between when a founder passes and when a new beneficiary takes over from him or her. That is a critical period because at that point, the estate is still being probated. The shares have not been transferred. The directors are, it's in a state of flux. And again, the Butch Stewart case comes to mind. I consulted in that matter and firmly on Team Adam. And the issues that were spawned as a result of that transition period are vast. Right now, there are executors who are holding shares, directors who the beneficiaries don't want in the company, and it is a mess. Now, in Jamaica, we have certain non-binding regulations in the form of the PSOJ's Corporate Governance Code that tells you to have in place mechanisms to deal with succession. And the ultimate beneficiary owner of the company must be documented, and you must inform the registrar of companies and all of that. But what we don't have is the process. There's no law that compels directors to state the process leading up to the end. And that's a major gap. So yes.
Okay, thanks, Yualande. And Ria?
That is an excellent question. And I think most persons would tend to think of boards or maybe a shareholders agreement, especially as an attorney. But I would say the most underestimated governance structure would be a family council. Not because it has the most legal authority, but it's because it has the most, I think, preventative effect. A family council is a governance structure that is dedicated really to deal with issues that are family-related issues rather than business issues. So for instance, if it is we're preparing the next gen or setting expectations for family members who want to join the business, what do they need to have in order to join? Discussing the vision and the values of the family, explaining those succession decisions, educating the owners about their responsibilities and so on. So without that kind of forum, the conversations tend to be very, very informal or not had at all. They're totally avoided. And what happens is that there are assumptions. Assumptions take their place instead of a family council. And assumptions, again, is really one of the greatest source of conflicts in a family business. So I think our family council also supports other governance structures. So it could support the actual shareholders agreement or the family constitution, because at least in that way, now it's not just a document. The family agreement, the shareholders agreement isn't just a document. It's a document that everybody now understands and accepts and continues to engage in it. And Andrew would have mentioned it in his presentation. Trust. Governance documents don't build the trust. It's relationships that do. And I think the Family Council helps build and maintain that trust. So if I had to choose just one singular governance document that is underestimated, I think it would have to be the Family Council, because again, it gives conflict somewhere legitimate to go before it reaches the boardroom or even worse, the courtroom.
Thanks, Ria. And Andrew, your perspective?
Yeah, Ria's on point. The family council is key. For me, I have quite a few friends and colleagues, excuse me, who are in family businesses, and one of the things that I see them overlook the most is having non-family directors, independent directors participating on their boards. I see many of them have employees, long-standing senior employees who are there and they want, they do their day-to-day. But when it's time to go into the boardroom, they get pushed out and the family walks into the boardroom. And our family is quite fortunate in that I'm the third generation, and our second generation family members were keen on having a number of independent non-family directors who actually outnumber the family. And very often there's discussions, emotions get involved, egos get involved, and we start not thinking about the business and we're thinking about ourselves. And those independent directors are able, you got to find the right ones who have the skill for it and the willingness to speak up in the right way, but they step in and they provide clarity and give you guidance on what is the best decision for the business. And if you don't have that, then it just ends up, I think, as Ria said, of tit for tat. I won today, you won tomorrow, and those hurt feelings build up over time until resentment can no longer be bottled up. And so having that structure in place can really alleviate the pressure at the board level and help bring clarity to the decision making.
Thanks very much, Andrew. So My second question to the panel is, we often hear people talk about succession described as an event, and Ria, I believe you described it as an event as well, but it is also a process, right, that needs to be undertaken. So what are the earliest indicators that a board should begin formal succession discussions, and what risks arise when organizations wait too long? Ria, if you can start us off.
So succession planning is a process, not so much an event. The transfer happens, it's not a transfer that happens on one day. So of course, preparing it should really begin years, sometimes even decades before. So I think the earliest indications are usually triggered not through legal documents, but really through behaviors and governance practices. So, for instance, where the founder begins developing people rather than him making every decision for himself. So they can start to delegate meaningful responsibility and mentor successors. And where conversations about the future now become a bit more normal. What skills will future leaders need? And where roles become a little bit clearer. So family members are no longer brought into the business simply because they are relatives, right? They have this criteria now for if it's employment, promotion, leadership, and so on. And I think that is really where the family begins preparing while there is no crisis. So if succession planning only starts when the founder is ill, and it shouldn't, or has died unexpectedly, or he's forced to retire, that's not succession planning. That's just a response. So build it now while, we still have the luxury and the privilege of time, because of course that doesn't return to us. So I think begin preparing when there is no crisis.
Yes, excellent, Ria. Definitely excellent suggestion and guidance to everyone. Yualande, your perspective?
I think for the family business, if you have to choose a time, should start no. But if you had to put a time range on it, I would think about 5 to 10 years before the anticipated transition. And for key leadership roles, I would think that would be an ongoing process because, like Andrew said, there has to be mentorship and training and all of that. So ongoing for those two things.
Good. Thanks, Yualande. And Andrew?
Yeah, the waiting too long is certainly one of the biggest risks and probably one of the biggest pitfalls that many fall into. Having especially from that first generation to second generation, where the founder is the one who built it and they will work until the day they're put in their grave, that can be a very hard thing to surmount. And so I don't see that it can start soon enough. It can perhaps when you're talking about succession, especially in a family business, if you started, say, 20 years before it's needed, it may not look like succession. It may look more like foundation building and putting in place the appropriate value system and putting in place family council structures, family constitutions that will govern us. And so, as Ria said, you're not doing it when it's in a crisis, you're setting the stage so that when we start seeing that succession becomes needed, then it's ready. And you asked, Adele, what's one of the indicators, but one of the ones that I've seen is often, especially again, the founder, the first generation, they very often have very close allies who have helped them build that business, people that they've worked with, and very often older people that maybe they were at they somehow got lucky with something, they brought in this person and that person has guided them along. And when that person starts to leave and new relationships have to be developed with new people, that founder sometimes says, right, I think maybe I need to start thinking about how do I hand over my stuff or my responsibilities to the next generation, because I'm too old, I'm too tired, I'm not interested, I want to do something else. I don't want to develop all of these new relationships with all these new people who have all these new ideas. And I think that's one of the big triggers that you see. Not always recognized though.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so a common challenge in family-owned businesses is balancing the family expectations with the business expectations and the business needs. How can boards and family leaders create fairness and transparency around leadership selection without creating division among family members? Because people might feel that I'm being overlooked. So, Andrew?
That's a tough one. Ria pointed out earlier equity. Equity doesn't mean fairness. And again, it comes back to foresight and laying those foundations that allow family members to get into the business. What is my path to joining this business? What does it look like? And how do we make sure that it's equitable for everybody? But to me, Adele, it comes back to time, that so many people wait till the last minute and then somebody is forced in for whatever one of the reasons Ria might have said earlier, whether it's the apple of their eye and etc. And then that creates the appearance of inequity. And so making sure that there is structured paths, that it's not easy, it's challenging, and that there's certain milestones that must be achieved, then allows the people who are both willing and capable to then step in and lead, because you often have a lot of willing people who may not be capable, and there's often people who are capable but just not willing.
Right. Okay. Yualande?
Well, competence and leadership is different from ownership. The founder or the person who is in the decision-making seat has to clearly identify those two and very distinct roles. Children cannot be felt to believe that the family business is their entitlement. They're not. They're not entitled to anything, and founders should make it known. If a child, no, an adult child, spends her time golfing or doing something else rather than getting in there day to day to know the business, understand it, then why would you want to put that child? As a director, I had a case where the client came to me and she had never been paid a salary. She had only ever given the company receipts. She paid her helper, she went to school, financed her studies, did everything, the whole thing, rent, everything. And the father, who was the founder, shareholder, would cut a check. And when he passed and the siblings came in and inherited the business alongside her, that whole thing fell apart. That's now in court. You must distinguish between the two roles. Someone who does not do business cannot lead a business when you are gone. They might be entitled to a piece of the business, and so you give them reports annually as a shareholder. But the child who turns up to lead can direct. It's simply in my mind. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I agree.
Thanks. Adele,
Yeah.
I just wanted to
No.
share, we're into the last half hour of this
Right.
panel, so you may want to engage with the audience as well for the Q&A. And if I may kick it off, I wanted to ask Andrew, as the one family member here, to share with us specifically those things that Yualande and Ria just spoke to, which is that, when you were in the family and you're being groomed for a position, was there any time where you felt one either that you really weren't so interested and to spend 11 years moving from a trainee, all the way up. I mean, is this really what you wanted to do with your life? And two, how did the family itself navigate among the siblings and the cousins and everybody as to how would you identify the person with the competence and the leadership skills to groom into positions?
So to the first one, there was never excuse me, there was never a point where I wasn't interested in what I was doing. I was very challenged. I had a lot of I was given a lot of autonomy, as I said, to kind of make my own mistakes and I learned a lot. Not to say it wasn't challenging. There were times where pressure came from certain areas and definitely some family members where um, you started to question, do are they really looking after me or are they trying to prevent me maybe from getting to where I wanted to go? But with time and with conversation, those pressures alleviated and we moved along. And so it worked out well, I think. And I'll say that my succession plan was always that from an insurance point of view there was not any kind of real structure for me to succeed into the role I am today, which is the CEO of the group. And that kind of just happened organically. And I think it could have been a little more thought out and a little more structured, and it might have been a bit more successful, but it just works out at the end the way it worked out. Tell me the second part of the question, Kamala.
And that was because you actually just said it wasn't all fully planned that way, that it worked out. So how did it work? Is it that the rest of the family basically supported you in that position? Were there any other cousins who actually thought they were being groomed for that role? And
Well,
then it
I was quite unique. There's 13 of us. I am the only, or at the time, there's one more now, but I'm the only one who is employed in the business. And I think Yolanda said it's simple. If you're not interested or if you're not interested, then you shouldn't let people into the business. And it's not that there wasn't people who weren't interested, they just never joined. And so I spent quite a long time working in the business, and I think my cousins certainly saw that I was intent on making this work, and I was working at it. And I definitely had a lot of support from them, as well as my siblings, who were one of two are involved. And they were there to support me, guide me, and push me along to say, yeah, this is the right thing for you to do. You got this, and we're here to help you however we can.
Yes, that's great. So I just wanted to share, we have heard, the foundation story of G.A. Rowan Sons over the years. We've had both Alice present to us for Governance Week, and we have Elizabeth Cox as well, who is one of those non-family members who serve on your board. And one of the things that really stayed with me and which I share with a lot of people all the time was the fact that the foundation of your company did have that sort of independent family council, that helped put a structure in place for longevity, which is why you are now into your fourth generation, which is
Yeah.
an excellent thing.
The
Um,
family council, I just want to say that again. Ria brought it up. The family council is key. That's where the family can deal with family matters and they can be kept as best as possible out of the boardroom. Because once those family matters get into the boardroom, the independent directors kind of step back and they say, whoa, this is nothing to do with me. This is for you guys. So by pushing that away and keeping the board to the business, and then the family in the family council is it's a very good structure and one that has served us very well over the years.
yes, excellent. Adele, there are a couple of comments in the chat from people, but as you looked at that, Yolande, I wanted to ask, so you don't have to go into specifics for us, but that uh, case with Butch Stewart, is it that there was no structure in place that intended to tell family members who was going to do what, and so it all fell apart because there had not been a plan, or is it that there was a plan and it was challenged by others who did not feel that they got their entitlement?
Well, without breaching any professional guidelines, no, actually, the founder had, you'll be impressed by his will. He had pages
Okay.
and pages and pages of it. He took the time to have it structured, drafted by competent counsel. One of the best commercial lawyers, I think, here in Jamaica. That wasn't the problem. The problem was the stage between his death and when the beneficiaries were to inherit the legacy, when they would get it. Who takes control of that vast empire? Who makes the decisions while it's working its way through probate and all that's being done? Who, what can the trustee shareholder do? What happens? And that's where all of the litigation is right now. 4 jurisdictions they're fighting in. I mean, a panel of lawyers, I think there are now 20 something on both. So this is why I suggest that you have a roadmap between the death and the legacy becoming the beneficiaries.
Okay.
And independent directors, I think Colin mentioned that. I mentioned that as well. Must have teeth. Very important, because the independent directors are the ones who will say, listen, Andrew said that they'll step back. The ones in this estate not necessarily stood back, but independent directors will say, I am the decision maker. When you bring so much emotion to it, I have to break and make the decision. So it is very important.
Okay, I find it very interesting that you say that there was a very detailed will as well, which clearly meant that, there was a thought out process of what should happen. So, of course, as you were pointing out, that is not enough. The governance structure itself has to be in place to manage
Yes,
that transition.
to manage the transition.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So
So
we
we've
are
had a
going.
couple of persons, making comments along the way, and thank you very much for your comments. But with the time, we have like just over 15 minutes left. So I want to open it up to questions from participants. So if you can raise your hand, your virtual hand, and when you raise your hand, you can introduce yourself and ask your question. Let's keep it concise so we could accommodate as many as possible.
Right. Colin.
I see Colin Soopingchow, but I saw
Yeah,
your
Go ahead,
hand.
Colin.
yeah. Let me start off by saying this is not an area that I have expertise in, but I've done work with a lot of corporate entities across the region, including family-owned businesses, right? And the point I'm making here is it's not just about independent board members, but it seems to me that there must be a distinction between the way you develop your will and the whole succession and transition strategy, which is legalistic to some extent. And you have to make sure, but it's not legalistic in totality. You have to make sure it's aligned. If there's any misalignment, right, there could be room for confusion. So a will is not a solution to this problem. It's part of the solution. That's my first point. Second point is that a lot of these businesses have been built from the ground up, right? It may not have happened in Andrew's case because he's third generation, right? So it might have been 2 generations before, right? But in many cases, what I've seen, they've been built from the ground up, right? So when this transition is taking place, or the succession, or the handover, and the baton is being passed, you typically have an executive chairman. And even if they are independent board members, right, you typically have an executive chairman that's the drive of the business, the person who's expanding the business, growing the business, knows every nook and cranny in the business, right? And therefore, there could be a tendency to deal with this succession internally, right? And with very limited external advice. And I think that is something that has to be, that I think that is where there's another opportunity for fallout, right? Because inherently, this is an emotive and entitlement issue. Once people feel my kid is entitled to something here, right? Okay. And it may be that there are multiple family shareholders, or and they get emotional about it, this becomes a potential grenade with the pinpull, right? It's just a question of when it will explode, right? So when I've seen it handled very well, and I've not looked at it in any level of detail, that's why I'm starting by saying I'm not expert, is when that powerful sort of executive chairman, this is a very limited set of circumstances that I've seen, gets external help. Legal is one component, but the other component is people who are experts in this area and who could guide them through the entire process. To me, that's the critical piece in here.
Thanks,
Having done
Colin.
all of that, there could still be fallout. It just depends on, because this is inherently emotional, right? But you could
Yes.
mitigate the fallout if you really try to deal with it properly.
Yeah. Thanks so much. And that's certainly something that I got from all the panels. Huh? We will have conflict. It's how it's managed. So Saron has her hand up now. Go ahead, Saron.
Yes, good evening. Interesting discussion, wonderful. And you know, when Andrew mentioned independent directors, and they have independent directors on their board, and he's what, fourth generation? Every single time you mention independent directors or family-owned business, there's this resistance. You know, and don't even talk about when you talk about independent chairman. What an independent chairman to come and take over my business so on. You know, so maybe there's a need to emphasize the difference between directors and shareholders. The directors don't have to own a piece of your business, you know, but there's value to be gained from what they have to offer. And I keep having to, you know, just emphasize the benefits over these perceived risks of takeover that family-owned businesses have in their head. You know, so that's just one comment I wanted to make.
Thanks so much, Saron. And we have in the chat from Sherry-Ann Joseph. Sherry-Ann was saying it is important to ensure your successors are matured enough to take on the responsibility, despite having structures in place. The right mindset is critical. They can break apart what took years to build. Right, so that was a very good point made, Sherry, and thank you. And I see Quantrell has put the survey link in the chat. I want to remind everyone, please do click on it and give us your feedback. This was again yet another great panel with some tremendous insights for us. So we would really appreciate that. And yes, Alistair, I see you've put in the chat. You have a question. Go right ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I could not raise my hand at all. So very, very good there, guys. I really enjoyed it. Yualande, a question for you, just on the point in time where you see the biggest issues, pressures on family transition. And I like what you had to say. It's like post-death. And for me, one of the concerns I have is, especially multi-jurisdictional, is tax obligations. Can you speak a little bit to that? Because obviously that puts a financial pressure on the individual shareholders. So can you speak a little bit to that, given your extensive experience?
Can you be a bit more specific with your question with regard to tax?
Yeah, sure. I mean, income tax due on the transition of the assets to the descendants.
Are you speaking about how to profit maximize during the transition process? The best way is that?
No, I'm simply talking about the actual change of the owner of the assets, and any tax that arises from that. It may just be a U.S. issue, but is there any tax that you've seen that arises on the transfer of the assets between one person to the next?
Well, it really depends on how you structure the assets. In particular, there are companies that have their corporate structure in tax havens, and they do it in a particular way that allows the change in ownership to be merely by name, as opposed to a transfer of the whole asset from one to another. So the structure owns it, and then the beneficiary steps in to take the place of the legacy owner. That can be one way. I think primarily when you're dealing with corporate assets, the primary thing that you should consider. Well, in Jamaica, it depends on the jurisdiction that you're dealing with, but there are certain corporate taxes that you will have to pay, transfer taxes, when you are transferring the legacy, and it depends greatly on the type of asset you are transferring, whether it be intellectual property or real estate or, a number of things. So it's such a broad question. It's hard for me to give you advice on it like that.
What sort of structures, last question, what sort of structures do you see then holding, like shares specifically? Trust?
I like trusts. I like trusts, and I like when they're set up in jurisdictions that allow for tax minimization.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alastair, and great to have you with us here for Governance Week again. And Alastair would be on our panel tomorrow, I think. So we'd be hearing him then. There's another comment in the chat. This is from Fallon. Fallon, would you like to unmute and share your comment with us very quickly? We're heading into the last 10 minutes of our panel discussion. And I'm not seeing her unmute. So, oh yes, there we go. Go ahead, Fallon. You can
Hi,
share
good
your
evening,
comment.
everyone. I just wanted to share that I am so appreciative of the panel members and the information that was shared. It was a wealth of knowledge. And just to reiterate what I said in the chat, the legacy framework is a very practical framework, and it's a key takeaway to family business as well as SMEs. So that is a very practical. Thank you, Ria, for that share of that framework, right? And it's just a matter of conflict as well and how we see conflict. Sometimes we try to avoid conflict, but it is necessary for us to discuss the issues and move forward and move on. So that's just my contribution. Thank you so much.
You're most
Yes.
welcome, Alan.
Right. Thank you, Fallon. Adele, as we go into the last minutes, maybe we can ask the panelists for their closing thoughts, because I'm not seeing any other comments in the chat, and there's no hand up either.
Yep. So if we can get some comments from Andrew to start us off.
Yeah, since excuse me if I mispronounce your name, but I think it's Cerrone Bailey. Since hearing her thoughts on the independent directors, that's kind of sat with me because it sounds like she's struggling with getting somebody to think that it's a good idea. And it just made me, I'll just to say, two of my independent directors are actually on this session, and having that kind of support from people who aren't really obliged to give it to you is tremendous. Al is there as well as my cousin, and I'm appreciative that he's here. But what you expect from family to support you, but from other people when they step in and they support you and they take legitimate interest in what you're doing and your well-being and your success, it's a great inspiring feeling for somebody who's young and trying to figure it out. But I think that's probably not going to help you, Saron. So what I was going to say is that one way that you might be able to influence people into appreciating that this is a good idea to bring these people in, especially in a family business, is that the family, you may have one person who understands the business, works it, and they understand. But when you start getting other family members in who maybe you're running a distribution company and a family member who runs hotels comes in, and maybe one who's a doctor or an attorney steps in, while it's good to have the diversity of experience, you really need somebody who has the technical know-how to run that business. And that is a great way of bringing them on board, is you look out for people who have had a career in a certain industry, who have maybe wound down their day-to-day responsibilities, but still want to contribute and have tremendous knowledge to give and are willing to, and then invite them in a technical capacity and then see how that relationship grows. And if it works out, they'll become more and more ingrained into the business until you realize that, they're just one. They're there with you when all of those hard decisions have to be made. So just thought I'd share, maybe one idea of how you could influence and encourage people who need to yet be shown the light.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Ria? your final thoughts?
Sure. Well, as we would have heard, that it's succession planning is more than simply transferring the assets, transferring the shares or the title. It's about building that system that could hold the difference between the expectations and the reality, the capability of one person and the incapability of another. What is considered fairness, or what I see as fairness and the other person may see as favoritism. So once we can build a structure to hold that emotion without allowing that difference to fracture the family or the enterprise, I think we would have a successful succession, because I think from this discussion, we realize that the families who press on and who endure are not the ones that don't have any conflict. They are the ones that build the structures for that conflict to be heard and to be seen and managed and somewhere for it to go. So I think we have to always ask and be conscious of, have we built into our system sufficient governance, sufficient clarity and communication with our family members and stakeholders, so that when that conflict or those tensions arise, they actually are there to strengthen our continuity rather than just testing it. So in that way, I think succession, we stop fearing succession, and it is now something that families can be equipped to manage and sustain.
Thanks, Ria. Yualande?
I want to end by saying that transitions are never usually easy, personally and professionally. But if you have the proper corporate governance structure, and we know what that is, regular board meetings, you document it, you have your minutes, you have the structure in place, it will significantly reduce the likelihood of you ending up in conflicts and spiraling into places that you don't want to go. So have those, and have a transition process manual ready, because that's the gap. It's not covered anywhere legislatively. If you have that in place, then you'll have a smoother transition.
Thank you very much, Yualande. I want to thank everyone who participated in this panel discussion, and also our audience, and our distinguished panelists, Andrew, Ria, Yualande. You really gave us a lot of information. I think today's discussion has reinforced an important governance reality. Succession is not about replacing people. It's about preserving continuity, protecting value, and ensuring organizational resilience in an increasingly volatile world. So the organizations that thrive over generations are not necessarily those that avoid leadership transitions. They are the ones that prepare for them thoughtfully, transparently, and intentionally. So thank you all for your engagement, and enjoy the remainder of Caribbean Corporate Governance Week.
Thank you very much, Adele. Thank you, Yolande. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much, Ria. It really was such a great panel. And, I felt that I learned a whole lot as well, listening to the experiences of people here today. So this brings to an end Day 4 of Governance Week 2026. What a really, really great day we have had so far. We began this morning with Brian Imambaks from Suriname with his presentation, and we started panel 1, professionalizing the family enterprise, boards, controls, and strategic discipline. We had Kiran Maraj from Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Vishnu Durga from Guyana, and Andrea Ball from Jamaica, with our moderator being Angela Leloy. We moved then to panel 2, leading through disruption, governance, and risk for SMEs. And what a great panel that was, with Sanji Pierre Chase, attorney at law, Emerson John Charles, an innovation specialist, and Riyad Singh, holding on for the very last minute for Dr. Mikhail Mohammed, Chief Operation Officer for Farm and Function, but really came with such a wealth of experience from across the Caribbean. Our moderator then was Brendan King. And we have ended a brilliant day now with this lovely panel that looked at succession without conflict. structures for continuity and stability. Our panelists were Andrew Rowe, and Andrew was making his maiden appearance here at Governance Week. Andrew, we're letting you know one time we'll be coming back to you again because, you know, J. Rowe and Sons is one of the members of CCGI, and of course, we want to ensure that your voices are amplified across the Caribbean. We are
Thank
also
you.
very, very happy to have had Ria Mankee-Sookram. Ria has been a member of CCGI for many years now and someone who is very familiar with Governance Week because we always turn to her. Yualande Christopher, Yualande, of course, is a member of CCGI as well out of Jamaica, someone we hold very dear to us, who we have invited several times and never fails to really impress us with the wealth of knowledge that she brings. And for the first time on a Governance Week stage, we had Adele Baig-Rameshwar. So Adele, thank you so much for the great job you did with this panel today. Thank you all for your contributions as we bring day 4 to an end. Quantrell, I'm going to ask if you have the video ready for us to close off and say thank you to our sponsors as we get ready to bring the curtains down. Thank you so much. That was the lovely music of Joshua Regrello, a talented young panelist here from Trinidad and Tobago. I did forget to say thank you to all the members of our audience. Thank you all so much. Some of you have been with us from the start of Governance Week. Some of you have been here all day. We really appreciate you. We appreciate the fact that you are so engaged and giving us your feedback and interacting with us too. So join us tomorrow when we have our final day for Governance Week 2026. We move to governance of groups and conglomerates, and our opening presenter, we are very, very appreciative, is Mr. Robert Riley, who is the chairman of Massey Holdings Limited. So I know he has prepared a great presentation. He's struggling with time to make sure he does not use up the entire 1 hour because he says he has so much that he wants to share with us. So I invite all of you to come join us tomorrow for our final day of Governance Week 2026. Have a wonderful rest of the evening now.
Thank you, Kamla. All right, have a great evening.